Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming. That's a pleasure to have you here for coming to GLC event. I'm Shafiq Hassan. I'm a acting president of GLC today. And I am gonna introduce to you Sarah and Bill Johnston. They have a history of family supporting GLC for a long, long time, and they're very, very powerful, really supportive. And Sarah and Will.
Thank you, Shafiq. Yes, we're Bill and Sarah Johnston, and we were asked to speak a little bit about the history of the Global Learning Center and the Howard and Jean Johnston Global Community Citizenship Award. We are representing the Johnston family tonight. Bill is the son, and I am the daughter-in-law of Howard and Jean Johnston, who were some of the founders of the Global Learning Center. Along with others, Howard and Jean founded the Global Learning Center in April of 1988, which was 35 years ago. The mission of this organization is to provide opportunities for learning about peoples and cultures of the world to promote a peaceful future. At the beginning, in 1988, the Global Learning Center had an office on East Central. We presented monthly events and hosted ethnic dinners. The organization also established the language classes in Arabic, Farsi, French, German, Japanese, Mandarin, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. Especially up until the pandemic, the Global Learning Center has continued with really all of those activities except for teaching the languages. And I will have to say that I think we all are so appreciative for those who got us through the pandemic so successfully. And I think Holger Meyer really deserves a tremendous amount of credit for that accomplishment. In terms of the Howard and Jean Johnston Global Community Citizenship Award, it was established in 2000 to honor individuals who have made an outstanding contribution to global learning. The criteria include years of membership and service to the board, a role as a model global citizen in the community, presentations to the Global Learning Center, and contributions to education at any level. And so I think now Jim Phillips will be introducing our award winner.
Holger Meyer, physicist. No, I didn't know, not yet. I have to say a few words about you first. Holger Meyer, physicist, physics researcher, teacher, professor at Wichita State. But he is more. He, as an activist, with a strong sense of social responsibility, which I know he takes seriously, he has displayed that in the areas of climate change, peace, the economy, and other pressing issues. Holger has been an indispensable member of the Global Learning Center. He has given talks on alternative energy sources, helped with organizational matters in the GLC, and technology. He has also served as president of the organization as well as treasurer. And he was president during the rather dark days of the pandemic when we could only meet on Zoom and we didn't dare meet in public. So we are happy tonight, members of the Global Learning Center, to present the 2023 Howard and Jean Johnston Global Community Citizenship Award to Dr. Holger Meyer. I think of no one who has ever been more deserving of this award. So we would now like to present, Holger, would you come up as well as the Johnsons?
You know, I really do appreciate this. I do feel honored. When I learned that you were going to give me this award, I thought, oh dear, they didn't find anybody more deserving. And I was looking back at who received it before. And I remember Mary Herron, who, you know, smuggled contraceptives into Ireland when that could still get you years in prison. And I've never had to do anything nearly as courageous as that. Reverend Sam Meiskens is a former recipient, and he set up that whole school in Lambert in Haiti that has been helping and teaching a large number of children there. And so I, you know, I feel like I'm not accomplished enough to stand in this line of previous recipients, but I do definitely feel very honored and appreciate the award. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Center. Oh. Mute.
Okay, now I want to introduce our featured speaker, Dr. Bob Flax. The title of his talk is Creating a Global Democracy for a Peaceful, Just, and Sustainable World Community. Bob has had 3 careers. First, he was a practicing psychologist. He worked for many years as a senior psychologist for the Department of Correction, California Department of Corrections. And for 2 years, he was the sole or full-time psychologist in the death row section of the San Quentin prison. They let me out, luckily. Yeah. Secondly, a second career was in organization development and conflict resolution. His third career, I will mention now, until his recent retirement, Bob served as executive director of the Citizens for Global Solutions. Everybody can hear me, right? I'm okay? Okay. Which is headquartered in Washington, D.C. An organization committed to the rule of law on a global level. Bob's education, training, and experience led him to getting involved in the global democracy movement to deal with problems of war and peace and other problems facing the entire globe. Bob has served as director of research and also as a professor at Saybrook University. So now I want to present to you, we're very happy and honored to present to you our featured speaker, Bob Flax.
Okay. That's a good idea. Okay. Where is? It's there. Okay. And terrific. Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? Is this on now? Yes. Okay. Is the volume okay or, I mean, okay, terrific. All right. I'm originally from New York, so I know how to shout if need be. So. Okay, I'll let folks take a seat and then we'll start. Okay, I didn't realize we're going to be skewed to this side, so I'll mostly face over here. But occasionally, since we're being recorded, I'll look over here to face the camera and the folks here. So anyway, first, Jim, thank you for doing all the arrangements and all the behind-the-scenes stuff to make this happen. And I want to say good evening to everybody, and thank you for attending on this wonderful, very warm night in Wichita. I've never been to Wichita before, so it's my first experience. So. When I connected with Jim yesterday, he let me know that actually this is a very momentous gathering for you because it's been some years now since you went on into cyberspace to have your meetings. And this is kind of coming out into the going from, I guess, the virtual reality to this reality, such as it is. But I want to tell you that there's a parallel process going on, whereas when the pandemic hit, I also went, both teaching and presenting in cyberspace. So, and that's been for years that I've been doing that now. So when Jim first called me, I have to admit I had a moment of panic because for the 4 years, I've gotten really good at talking to computer screens, and presenting to computers, but I actually didn't know if I still knew how to talk to human beings, in this kind of setting. So we're both kind of going through the same thing, coming out of cyberspace into this reality. And there might be a little bit of culture shock and maybe even a little bit of collective trauma. But don't worry, as Jim said, I'm a psychologist, so we can work through it together. And I learned we have at least 1 or 2 other psychologists in the room. So if things get a little bit overwhelming, we can shift into working through that. And I'm sure if everyone keeps breathing, it'll all turn out. Okay, so kidding aside, being folks who are here because you're interested in international relations, global affairs, and things like that, I'm sure you're all very well aware of the problems that we face today. So we've got our new war raging in the Middle East. We've got our continuing war in the Ukraine, which both could easily go sideways and turn into larger conflicts, as you know. We're keeping our fingers crossed on that. We've got global environmental calamities and disasters that are happening with increasing frequency and increasing severity. We've got a pandemic that killed at last estimation a little bit under 7 million people so far. And we don't know what's going to happen with the next mutation, et cetera, et cetera. We've got species going extinct at an alarming rate. We've got human rights abuses and violations in China with the Uyghurs, and Myanmar with the Rohingyas, on and on and on. And the list goes on. I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with all of those things. So it's a very challenging, to put it mildly, situation. So what I want to do tonight is kind of take a step back from all of that and look at the context in which all of those problems live. In other words, the way the world governs itself. And the way I'd like to do that is I'll start by looking at a piece of history where the kind of current system of global governance got started. And to do that, let's see, terrific. The tech is working so far, so I'm happy. So to do that, I'm going to start with a piece of history that has largely vanished from the schools and from the textbooks and things like that, but it focuses on a time where there was actually an alternative vision for how the world could organize itself. And we'll start with that. Okay. So at the end of World War II, there were many people talking about how to make sure we never have a World War III, because as you know, or as they knew back then, that if there was a World War III with the advent of atomic and nuclear weapons, that would likely be the end of civilization as we knew it. So most of those conversations turned into the United Nations. And I bet most of you know the iconic first line of the preamble of the UN Charter, that we, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. So that was the thrust, even though the UN was going to go about it in very innovative ways. Okay? But as we also know, we've had about 250 wars or so since, not counting the two that I just mentioned. And if you look at just the war situation, and also look at things like climate change and the pandemics and the other problems that I've listed, you know, the UN, for all the good it's done, and let me say I'm not a UN basher, it's done a lot of good. However, it's clear that it's limited in what it could do in these really large existential issues. So at the time the UN was being formed, okay, there was actually another proposal for how it might be organized that was there on the world stage. There were a number of very prominent people that supported that, including Einstein, who, by the way, was one of the founding members of the board of the organization that I just retired from, Gandhi, Eleanor Roosevelt, Truman, Churchill, and many others who were looking, who were supporting this other way to organize the UN and the way the world governs itself. And that was to create a global, a creative global democracy. Now, the idea of global democracy comes under a number of names. In addition to global democracy, kind of the formal official name is a world federation. It's also been called a world union, a world republic, etc. So I'd like to start off with playing a 2-minute film clip of a few people talking about global democracy.
Democracy in its purest form, every man and every woman with an equal voice. And I want to see if we can apply this on a worldwide scale. We're told democracy creates stability and raises living standards. So why not for everybody?
Il y a des questions aujourd'hui globales et qui nécessairement et fondamentalement interpellent des réponses globales.
Our sense is that there's a huge democratic deficit in the world today, a huge gap between the world that we have and the world that most people everywhere want.
I think we can create something which has never existed. The first world democratic revolution.
Equalize the world, equalize the voices.
Global democracy in which a unified and standardized democracy worldwide.
Yes. Incluyendo China, incluyendo África, incluyendo India, incluyendo los países árabes.
This has never been done before.
One person, one vote.
Don't tell me the story, oh wait, your time will come. No, my time is now.
People are fed up, and therefore they get together and act. Il est temps d'actionner quoi, d'être actif quoi.
Social problems are related to democracy.
People of the world have absolutely no say in how the world is run.
One will vote for what? They vote what? Miseria, poverty.
Poverty. Equal rights for women.
The protection of the environment.
education, medicine, healthcare, many problems. The distribution of food, probably food. No, don't take too long.
Everything started in Ethiopia.
Yo me atrevo a decir que es posible hacerlo en media generación, en 12 o 15 años. So I think 10, 15 years.
Ethiopia has become years.
Can you imagine what is possible?
Okay, well, you can applaud, I guess. I didn't expect it, but, so what would a global democracy look like? Okay, so I'd like to start off with an analogy. Now, I live in California, even though I still retain my New York accent, where I grew up. California has this border, there we go, with Arizona, and it's roughly 200 miles of the Colorado River. And as you could imagine, especially with water getting more and more scarce, that from time to time there are disputes over the water in the Colorado, who's going to get it and how much. Now, I don't know if the news came out here, but some years ago when Schwarzenegger was governor, we called him the Governator from his times with the Terminator movie, he began calling out the National Guard to go over to the Colorado River to commandeer the water, basically. And Janice Brewer, who was the governor of Arizona at the time, didn't want to be sitting idle, so she started mobilizing the National Guard in Arizona. And let me ask, have any of you heard of this? It was called the California-Arizona Water Wars. Anyone? One or two? Okay, we're going to have to talk to you guys later because it never happened. I made it up. Okay. So, but the question is, why wouldn't something like this have happened? Anyone?
It's happening already.
Well, that's this one isn't happening, but yeah, hey, we have a federal government, right? So rather than battle it out, on the battlefield, you appeal to a higher authority, the federal courts, right? It goes to court, one, state might sue the other in court or whatever. A law, a decision gets passed, a finding, and it's enforceable, okay, at that level, okay? And if Schwarzenegger happened to want to do something like that for real, what would happen is he would be carted off to prison, right? So what if we took this idea of enforceable law and brought it up just one more notch, one more level to the world level? So for example, when you and I all go to vote, in addition to voting for our mayor and the local representatives and voting for our governors and the state representatives and the president and the federal representatives, what if at the same time, when we kind of pulled the lever or did whatever we did, we also voted for representatives to the World Parliament? And what if at that time that was set up by certain principles? In other words, there was a constitution, a world constitution, a Bill of Rights. There were the global institutions necessary to make that run. There was universal accountability, so no one was above the law, and also individual accountability, which we basically don't have now on the international level. We have state accountability. So if you don't like Putin, well, not don't like, but if it looks like he's committing crimes, what do? You don't arrest him and bring him to jail, or bring him to court rather, and find if he's guilty or innocent. You arm the Ukrainians, fast forward back a little bit with Assad. We arm the rebels, we embargo the country, starve the children, and all that, because we have state accountability, not individual accountability. And I'll talk a little bit about the International Criminal Court in a minute, because we actually helped bring that into existence. So where did this kind of idea come from? Okay, so originally, or for eons actually, there were the great empires of the world. But those are the antithesis of what I'm talking about, because that's what technically we call a unitary government, where the king, the emperor, the royal family, whatever, they put out their edicts and it goes throughout the world. That's not a federal system where you have the local problems handled at the local level, the national problems at the national level, and the global problems at the global level. So over time, the ideas began to evolve. So Dante, who wrote the Divine Comedy and the Inferno, which he's most known for, also wrote a much lesser known book called The Monarch, or I think it was La Monarchia, or whatever it was in Latin or Italian, whatever he wrote in. And he began to look at, to establish world peace, that there would need to be some kind of central system, although he was still thinking at that time in terms of a monarch at that level. Then fast forward a couple of generations, Hugo Grotius was a Dutch jurist known as the founder or father of international law. The Dutch, as you know, were great pioneers and traders, worldwide. And he began to realize that if you're going to have global trade, you need global law. You need some way to, run the show, essentially. So he began to lay down the foundations of what world law might look like. And go ahead a few more centuries, Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher, also wrote one of his lesser known books, Perpetual Peace, where he began coming up with the structure of what this world governance system might look like. And actually some of his ideas were later incorporated into the League of Nations. But the action really didn't get started until we got on the scene. And a little bit of American exceptionalism, but actually the Swiss were doing it at the same time. So we were not alone. So anyhow, you probably remember that when the 13 colonies, I don't remember from being there, I remember from class, when the 13 colonies broke off from Great Britain, we declared independence, the 13 colonies did not become the United States of America. That for a period of a little less than a decade, we ran under the Articles of Confederation. So essentially the 13 colonies were kind of like 13 separate nations that, tried to cooperate in certain areas. So there were a number of problems with this system. And actually, I must have missed school that day or whatever. Only years later did I learn what these were. So first, on the economic front, 7 of the states actually printed their own currency. So it was very difficult, working with each other and having any kind of commerce. Different states and even different cities boycotted products from other states and cities. And a number of the states and cities imposed large taxes on various products. So what we have come to know is the kind of economic engine of the United States really couldn't get started. I mean, it was just stuck for these and other reasons. There were also battles between the states, that there were 2,000 settlers from Connecticut went into Pennsylvania and they were massacred by the Pennsylvania Army. Okay? Maryland and Delaware fought what was called an oyster war over fishing rights in the Potomac River. When foreign products came into the New York harbors, they passed by some of the ports in New Jersey, and New Jersey demanded tariffs on them, and New York said no. So New York collected that, and then they started fighting and engaged, had cannon battles across. As I said, I grew up in New York. I was just there last week, and I think they're still fighting, but that's another story, okay? So, and New York also took a number of their troops and kind of massed them along the border with Vermont. I have not been able to find out why yet. Maybe they didn't have a reason, but anyway. So there were actually a lot of domestic tensions and actual battles between the states. In addition to that, collectively, there were problems that 9 of the states actually had their own navies. So when they would go out on their own or go out protecting ships, they were so puny that the pirates would easily knock them over. So that was a problem. And the militias, which were all united under George Washington when we were fighting the British, they were now all separate armies and had difficulty coordinating. So in other words, things were kind of a mess, not unlike the world okay, no, wrong way. Okay, so things were a mess, not unlike the world that we have today. But you all know how the story unfolded from here, given how untenable this was. We had a number of our founding fathers wrote a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers, where they began to conceive of a way for the states to have certain sovereignty, certain independence, but there would also be a level of shared sovereignty at the federal level. Good pose? Taking the shot there? Okay. So, I gotta get the right angle. So, so anyhow, so they began to conceive of how this federal system might work. Now, today it seems, it's obvious, but back then, only a few years earlier, we had a king. So this was quite an innovation, conceptually. In addition to those folks, Ben Franklin had a friend who was either a member of the Iroquois Nation or one of the chiefs, and who told Franklin that the Iroquois, the tribes, I think there was 6 or 7 of them, were in constant battles with each other, and they decided to form a council above all of that. And there was 100 years of peace after that. There were 6 tribes originally, and the 7th one joined later. And I also heard, although I haven't double checked this, so you don't take it as gospel, but I heard that when they got together, only the women were allowed to vote. So that might have helped. But anyway, they formed another level. So then, poof, you put all that in the jar and stir, and you've got our federal government system with us, the states, and then the federal government on top with the shared sovereignty. So take that and fast forward about 200 years, and you get to what's now called the World Federalist Movement, the history of the movement itself, and that takes you back to World War II. So at the time, right after, and even a little bit before the war, this idea came out of having another governance level, and was solely, just like the UN, it was solely about abolishing war. That was the sole focus. And like all great movements, women's movement, civil rights movement, labor movement, there are a number of leaders and founders of the movement. And with the World Federalist Movement, though, only one of them had a movie done on his life, actually 2 movies, but one's in French. So I'm not going to talk about that one. Gary Davis. I'm not going to play the whole movie. It's over an hour. But I want to play for you the 5-minute preview of the movie. Not necessarily to glorify him, although he had an incredible life, but to give you a sense of what the zeitgeist was like at that time that gave birth to the movement. So here goes.
Gary Davis was a rising Broadway star. The night he stood in for the ailing Danny Kaye, he brought down the house, getting 13 curtain calls. Then the world went mad. Families were ripped apart. His brother was killed in action. Gary enlisted, eager to bomb Hitler's war factories. But then he was ordered to bomb a city full of civilians. Horrified at the carnage, he was enraged at the war system. Sure that there must be a better way to run our world, he set off to right the wrongs and prevent World War III. He gave up Broadway and made the whole world his stage. He dared to interrupt the squabbling of nations, to demand that the UN hold worldwide elections of a global Congress to outlaw war. and make peace. 20,000 war-weary Europeans rallied with him to demand that the world recognize the rights of humanity.
Illusion sur les difficultés que nous attendent. Mais nous devons choisir entre les difficultés et les massacres de la guerre. Moi, j'ai choisi.
The very next day, the UN unanimously passed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. With that authority, Gary then staged the most audacious performance of all. He declared a government of, by, and for the people of the world. He gave up his United States citizenship to raise his allegiance to the global level. He became the first official world citizen. His new government issued IDs, marriage licenses, and passports. Nations first rejected them and locked Gary up for failing to have national papers. But amazingly, hundreds of thousands began to register as world citizens. Nations around the globe began to stamp the world passports. Thousands of refugees and detainees, incarcerated for years for lack of identity papers, obtained world passports, and for many, freedom. Gary Davis stands for a world most people can only dream about. A world in which humanity is united. A future in which we free ourselves from the scourge of war and oppression. A world in which we are one. The Gary Davis story.
Okay. Good, still works. Okay. So this, by the way, is Gary's 90th birthday party that we had for him. He is over the lower right there holding his world passport. I'm hiding in the back there, but I got to design his birthday cake. So that was special. So this was in San Francisco. I'm sure he had a number of 90th birthday parties around the world. But one more thing to do on this, pardon me. Expand the screen. Okay, great. So at this time, with all of the interest in this, in uniting the world, we entered what the World Federalist Movement calls our golden age, essentially. A lot of momentum built and a lot of things happened at that time. We had 5 large organizations that merged to make an international organization. We had a very large youth movement around the world. There are actually 20 states in the United States where in the state legislatures, they supported a declaration for the Federation of the World. They were actually 20 states said they came out for it. And if you can believe this, there were 30 resolutions that were submitted to the US Congress for a world federation. Some of them got passed. This is an example, actually it's 2 concurrent resolutions in the House and the Senate, resolved by the House of Representatives, the Senate concurring, that it is the sense of the Congress that it should be the fundamental objective of the foreign policy of the United States to support and strengthen the United Nations and to seek its development into a world federation. So that went to the US Congress in 1949. In addition to that, many prominent people, scientists, religious leaders, scholars of all kinds, poets, philosophers, etc., came out in support of a world federation. Did any of you see, I'm sure a number of you have seen the movie Oppenheimer? Yeah. So Robert Oppenheimer is on that list. The movie was, I love the movie, it was great. What the movie didn't show is both Einstein, as you saw before, and Oppenheimer, and a number of the Manhattan Project scientists came out for a world federation as well. this image is taken off of an article that came out a week or two ago about that. There are a number of articles that, followed up the movie to talk about this. So anyway, that's from one of them. And the Roper organization, which was at the time the premier public opinion polling organization, sent out a survey, I think roughly 12,000 people around the country, asking the question, if every other country in the world would elect representatives to a World Congress and let all let all problems between countries be decided by this Congress with a strict provision that all countries have to abide by the decisions, whether they like them or not, would you be willing to have the United States go along with it? And as you see, almost 63% of the folks in the country polled said yes. So, so there was a large groundswell for something like this at the time. So you might ask, what went wrong? I mean, why don't we have right now a United States of the world? And the answer is this: we went into the Cold War. And this fellow, where is he? Yep, Joe McCarthy, yes, Boo Hiss, it was the junior senator of Wisconsin, if I remember correctly. He started going after anyone who had any kind of international interest and inklings and whatever, and labeling them communist. My organization actually is on a list of un-American activities from back then, go figure. So people got scared. People started losing their jobs, their reputations, et cetera, et cetera. So the movement shrank, kind of went underground, didn't disappear, but really, contracted over time but continued working over the years until the Berlin Wall fell in '89. Cold War was over, at least that one. We're in another one now. So hopefully it just stays cold. And at that time, over those decades, it's really clear the world was quite different by that time. So all of our major systems were now globalized: the economic system, transportation, communication, food, et cetera, et cetera. And in addition to our major systems, all of our major problems have been globalized as well, whether it's terrorism, poverty, pollution, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing really that hasn't globalized along with it is democracy. And the folks who are involved in this movement actually feel that the problems that we're seeing, that I kind of listed at the beginning, are not failures of the current system, they're features of the current system. They're what grows out of it and comes along with it. So, how would a global democracy work? Okay. So the truth is, no one knows. We don't have one yet, but it would be in accord with however the world constitution is written. But there are a number of proposals for what that might look like, and most of them agree that there'd be a global parliament with the same kind of structures of government that we're familiar with. Most of them have some type of proposal for how worldwide voting is done. This particular map has 12 voting regions around the world, and they've worked out the mechanics for how that would work. And most of the proposals out there have some type of actual structure of the parliament. This particular one comes from an organization called the World Constitution and Parliament Association. And I picked this one to show because I think they have a really neat feature in this one. You can see on the top, instead of like two parts, a Congress and instead of a House of Representatives and a Senate, like a two-chamber thing, they have three. And I kind of really like the thinking that went into this. So you don't have to read all the details, but on the left, basically, is more like the House of Representatives. So that's where the people are choosing a larger number of folks, of representatives. On the right is more like the Senate, where each nation gets to pick 1, 2, or 3 parliament representatives. But the center one, I really love, especially being an academic. That's called the House of Counselors, and it's an advisory body where colleges and universities around the world pick who they feel are their elders. So this is the Mother Teresa's, the Albert Einsteins, the Nelson Mandela's, et cetera, et cetera. So the colleges and universities recommend them And then the other houses do the actual selection. So they operate, so they're the elders built into, the world system. Anyway, I think it's kind of neat. So, so those are some proposals and ideas about what it would look like. The next obvious question is, how do we get there? So there are a number of proposals, and most of them tend to fall into these 4 different paths. So on the left is most people feel that, the United Nations is limited, et cetera, but it's what we have. So we have to work with it. Okay? So most of them are focusing on transforming the United Nations. If you're familiar with the UN Charter, Article 109 is the provision for a charter review. So the idea would be to hold one of those. It was supposed to happen in 1955, but mostly the US scuttled it. That's another story. But the charter review would allow the charter to be rewritten as a constitution. So, and there are a lot of strategies that are proposed on how to get to that point. So that's where most of the kind of the movement falls. But there are those who feel that the UN is so hopelessly broken, so bureaucratically mired that you've got to work outside of it. And those people are proposing these other 3 paths. The first one, integrate the regions, is people saying, look, if you look at things, it's not a one-step thing to this, it's a 2-step process. So if you look right now, the European Union is probably the most developed of the unions in the world, but there's also, the African Union, the Arab League, Pan American Union, there are a number of unions. So the first step is to strengthen those and to build them into, regional federations. And then once that's done, all you have to do is essentially connect the dots, and then you have a world federation. So that's one path. Second one actually came from a journalist right before World War II named Clarence Streit. He was a reporter, and his beat essentially was the League of Nations. And seeing Hitler and the power of the Nazis rise, he got alarmed and wrote a wonderful book. I'd recommend it if you can get it used, called Union Now. And what he argues in that is to take the 15 leading democracies in the world and essentially unionize them into a federation. And with the power of that, Hitler wouldn't dare challenge that. So the idea of that was to head off World War II, and that never happened. I mean, the British and the French couldn't coordinate on anything at the time, so that was doomed. But there were 2 organizations that came out of Streit's work, one in DC and one in Australia, that are still working on this. All these have organizations working on them right now. The last one, having a world constitution, is the group that had that chart I had over there, the World Constitution and Parliament Association. And they, for decades, have had a series of constitutional conventions with model world parliaments, they called it, and have drafted a constitution that now they're actually shopping around the world to try to get buy-in. And they're getting a lot of traction in the global south, particularly in India. I was down at a meeting in India where they had all kinds of Indian dignitaries attending this event, and also the Philippines as well. So they're getting traction in the south. So anyhow, so those are a number of the paths that have been proposed. Okay, so what would be the benefits of something like this? Well, I've kind of embedded it in the rest of the talk, that instead of resolving conflicts and disputes on the battleground, you can sue, you could bring it into court and have nonviolent ways, just like we have within a country, and you have, then it's enforceable in this plan. Right? Then, and then everyone remembers President Clinton's peace dividend. That this is a chart, 2021, of the discretionary spending, not the full budget, just the discretionary portion. And you see the military is almost half of it. If you add the Veterans Administration, taking care of the wounded and all, it's now more than half of it. So if anyone wonders why doesn't the United States have free healthcare and free education and all the things the other advanced nations do, well, it's right there. This is why. Okay. As far as the environment is concerned, as far as mowing down the next rainforest or polluting the next ocean, or bringing on more coal plants and more fossil fuels, so you can't breathe. And by the way, this is not the pandemic. This is some years before in China with one of their average days. So rather than having all of that, what if there was a global environmental protection agency or something comparable to that? And if there was a referendum and the people of the world said, we don't want any more than 350 parts per million of CO2 in the air, then the government has to enforce that. Okay. And there'd be more tools on the economic level to have the economic stability that we don't typically have. And you're probably familiar on the picture on the right, Eleanor Roosevelt holding up the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. They were able to call it universal because everyone voted for it at the time, except for the Soviet Union that abstained. So it became universal. But the way they got everyone else to sign up, just a little backstory, is a number of nations didn't want to sign. And the sales pitch at the time is they went to them and said, don't worry, it's not enforceable. Go ahead, sign. I said, okay, fine. It's not enforceable. We'll sign it. Okay. So that's kind of what happened in the back. But what if it was enforceable? What if something like this became the Global Bill of Rights? And if your rights are being violated, you can sue just like you can in a country. Okay. So everything I've talked about so far is about the movement's kind of long-term vision and what we'd like, you know, where we'd like to end up. But over the decades, since 1947, when the organization officially, the international organization officially got founded, they haven't been idle. There have been many things they've been working on. One is building global institutions. In 1995 was the initial coalition for the International Criminal Court. There were 25 NGOs as part of that. And the World Federalist Movement became the convener that then brought on more and more NGOs and eventually brought on the 120 nations that signed the Rome Statutes that created the court. So this has been our focus. We're looking at doing some similar things in the areas of human rights and the environment. Then we've also been working to strengthen the rule of law. These are a number of treaties that the movement has been involved with. Some we've been successful with, some we haven't. Some were ratified by other countries on the global level, but not the United States. For example, both the UN Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I think about 2/3 of the world signed on to that. We haven't. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, something like 90% of the world signed on to that. We haven't. So we were successful in other places with those, but we're still lobbying for that. In addition to treaties themselves, we've also sponsored a number of initiatives over the years. Again, this is roughly in chronological order. And we've also worked directly with the UN to try to democratize the UN and have various UN reforms. The first one you probably know or might know that picking a Secretary General for the UN was always a very kind of opaque backroom process that people really didn't know what was going on, and everyone knew that the US was really kind of pushing the issue of who would be the next person. So the World Federalist Movement sponsored the 1 for 7 billion campaign to get it more transparency in the process. And that's actually what led to the selection of Antonio Guterres, the current Secretary General. The other initiatives are things that we're still working on. Okay, so if any of this interests you, you might be wondering, what could I do? How can I help? So there are about 30 organizations around the world that are focused nationally that are working on this. The big one in the United States, the one I just retired from, is called Citizens for Global Solutions. And on the international level, the kind of umbrella organization is called the World Federalist Movement Institute for Global Policy. I'll put the contact information up for that in a second. So like all NGOs, we can use all the help we can get, whether it's research, writing, fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have a few spare hours or whatever in your month and want to participate in this, you're certainly welcome to. And I want to leave you with a quote from Einstein, where he said, "There is no salvation for civilization or even the human race other than the creation of a world government." He actually said that. I didn't make that up. Okay. So before I take questions, I just want to say this is the contact information for the different organizations. So Citizens for Global Solutions is the one based in Washington, D.C. Just the end of July, I retired from that. We have a wonderful new executive director. She's an international human rights attorney. I've been involved with the International Criminal Court and things like that. I've been kind of an outsider coming into this work. She's already an insider, so very excited about what she's doing. The global umbrella organization that helps coordinate all these national ones is the World Federalist Movement Institute for Global Policy. And on the bottom is me, if you wanted to write to me directly. Just to let you know, though, in a few days, I'm going to Egypt for a couple of weeks. So as a tourist, I'm not going to try to solve anything. So if you write to me, I will probably not be able to get back to you until after I get back, middle end of November. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for questions? Plenty of time. Okay, terrific. So any questions or comments or whatever? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good idea, but it also spooks me. Just looking at the current events in this country.
Yes.
How do you prevent somebody like Donald Trump from rising to the top of this thing?
Yeah. No, that's kind of like, they say the $64,000 question. How does the World Federation not become a global tyranny? Because as it is now, if you don't, like the country you're in, at least you can go to another country. But if you've got a global dictatorship, where do you go? To the moon? I mean, so well, maybe, have Elon Musk send you up there. So I won't list them all at the moment, but there are numerous kind of checks and balances built into this. Just one or two examples. One, in the United States, we have a profession called lobbying. In much of the world, that's illegal. It's called bribery. So that so things like that are working in different countries will be built in. Rather than having a single president, world president, another proposal has what they're calling a presidium, 5 different people from 5 different continents, and it rotates. So power doesn't stay with any one person for that long. There's a whole string of checks and balances that people have proposed, but again, the Constitution hasn't been written yet. So I don't know what's going to happen for sure. But certainly that's the question, especially looking at what's happened in the US. Another one is publicly funding campaigns. So you can't have, I won't mention any local names, but you can't have folks with a lot of money backing this candidate or that candidate, because that's now illegal. The campaigns are publicly funded, et cetera, et cetera. But we're human beings, there's no guarantees. So that's always a question that needs to, that we need to remain vigilant about. Okay. Yes, sir? Well, again, it depends how the framers of the Constitution, handle it. My guess, now I'm stepping out of the role of representative of the movement, just talking about myself, that there is currently something called the Parliament of World Religions. It was just held in Chicago like a month or two ago or so. And they have crafted, I think it's called a global ethic, and a number of things that the major religions agree on. So my guess is that groups like that would be consulted with in forming whatever how this deals with religion would be handled. So I think that's the most of what I could say now. But I guess the other part I'll add to that is, again, this is a federal system. So they're not legislating religion on the global level. It's what happens, that remains a local issue. They're only dealing with what now we call international issues. So that whole pile of stuff, which we're not handling that well, gets moved over into this, not all the local stuff. But thank you for the clarification. I'm just going to start and move on down. So yes.
Okay, if we talk about the nature of the war,
Yeah.
it's based on several elements. First of all, it's material. It's military. And it is #1 military how to get rid of it.
How to get rid of the US military? Is that what you're asking?
In the war. In the war.
How to get rid of military worldwide, you mean? Oh, okay.
The second.
I'll tell you how, but if
the
you.
second element is beliefs of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the third one, manipulation with the masses who became the need for the weapons.
Mm-hmm.
This is very substantial elements
Yes.
of the nature of the. We need to solve these problems, but how can you do it?
Sure. Well, let me.
This part, it's a good idea, but for me, it's like some kind of game for the adults with a good intention, but they're standing on the clay legs.
Yes. Well, let me go, you get three, let me go in order. Okay. So the first was war. So again, there are proposals out there for how militaries will be handled. So the one that I personally really like is that while this is being, I mean, probably it's not going to happen that you snap your fingers and all the countries sign on in one day. This will probably be an incremental thing, just like most global organizations, you know, NATO, it gets bigger over time, OECD, et cetera, et cetera. So probably while this is forming, they will still need a military. Okay? But the idea is once it's done, that not only is war criminalized, so you know, if you do that, you go to jail, but the planning, weapons manufacture, all of the elements of war making get criminalized. So you can't go and start planning, you know, you can't open a weapons plant, even if you haven't attacked anyone. That behavior becomes criminalized. So if you are manufacturing weapons, you're breaking the law. You get taken to court, you're either guilty or innocent, and if you're guilty, you're put in jail. So all of those resources, that energy, that talent, I remember years ago, even before I was involved with this, someone said in one of my social studies classes that the United States takes its top scientists and have them build nuclear guidance systems. The Japanese take their top scientists and have them build car doors. Okay, so so taking that talent and turning it into a more productive humanitarian cause is how I'm thinking that this will be handled. Second question was human beliefs, was that?
The beliefs, for example, religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good tool. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Control the people.
Again, there's no.
With the name of the book, they're fighting.
Sure. Well, they could have any beliefs they want, but the moment you take up arms, you're breaking the law. It's real simple, you know. Once you break, and of course that would even be breaking local law, not only world law. But yeah, everyone has their own belief. There's no belief police anywhere in any of the documents that I've seen. But it's the same thing in the country. You can believe whatever you want, but the moment you break the law, then there is enforceable law. And if you're breaking it on the global level, then you are adjudicated at that level. Was there a third?
The third one is, first of all, the whole history of mankind. There are a lot of lies. We don't know the real history of what's happening.
Yeah, so the history of what?
Civilization.
Uh-huh.
Which are missing, okay? For example, like Tartaria, okay? So they created the peaceful civilization and it's disappeared.
Oh, I see. Peaceful. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, and now I understand what you're saying. What is your question about that?
Accurate, to say softly.
Oh, sure. And even worse these days. I mean, with social media and all that, there's more misinformation also. We're in agreement.
So 1%, how to get rid of it?
Well, again, another way to look at the issue is it used to be that corporations were here, you know, 1%, and governments were here, you know. So as long as, you know, so if a group wanted to start a company, they would knock on the door of the government. If everything passed muster, they would grant them a license, they would operate, and as long as they operated legally, it would be fine. Okay? But, and if they didn't, then they pull the plug. It's the slang is called the corporate death penalty, and they're done, But now the corporations aren't here, they're here, and the governments are here. So if a corporation wants to, they can get child soldiers over here, pollute over here, mow down a rainforest here. And if, they have a particular problem with the government, they move to another government, But so there are two ways to handle this. One is to try to put the genie back in the bottle, which I don't think is going to happen. Or the other is take we the people and put us here. So those multinationals are now regulated in ways. So the 1%, they can't go and mow down the rainforest and stuff because they get put in the jail if they're, violating world law. So thank you. So I was going this way, but okay. I'll go. Yeah. Yeah, Jimmy Carter wouldn't agree with that, but yes. Mm.
Don't have the right to access to water.
Mm-hmm.
People in Hawaii are oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
Why make it on a large scale?
Yeah, well, wouldn't necessarily eliminate them, but you'd have one more level to appeal. And especially for indigenous cultures and cultures that have really kind of gotten the short end of the stick in the current system. There is, in fact, that's why there's a lot of momentum in the global South for these ideas, because they feel that the kind of US and Western democracy hegemony has pushed them, marginalized them, pushed them out. So there are a lot of folks who see this as the way out of that to, get above that and appeal at the world level. But again, it's a question of strengthening law and strengthening enforcement of the law. No guarantees, but again, we have, it's a proposal. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going back in this direction. Sir.
Two quick questions.
Okay, I'll give you one quick answer. Yeah. Yes.
Got a lot of publicity when
Mm-hmm.
Putin died here recently. And this group actually had a presentation years back from a lawyer at ICC.
Mm-hmm.
Only about 2/3 of the world's countries are ratifying that treaty.
Yeah, I don't know the number, but yes, it's not all.
Why? If the US is not in it.
Right.
Is that what's?
Well, the US is I mean,
My question
yeah,
is,
yeah.
who are some of the other countries that are not in it, and what's the rationale for not?
Oh, Russia, China, the troublemakers like us sometimes, just to comment on that, actually Clinton, and I think it was like his last day of office, he signed us into the ICC. So we endorsed it. Then Bush took us out, and then I forgot what they call it, the American Servicemen's Protection Act or something, that one of the Bushes, I think it was Bush Senior, said that if the ICC tries to prosecute a US soldier, we're going to invade The Hague. So that was his answer. And then Trump added some more obstacles and I think threatened to take away the visas and assets of the court investigators and all that stuff. So what we're doing right now, I mean, literally right now, is there are kind of two layers of it. First is we're trying to, and this is the American Bar Association is taking the lead on this, but we're working in conjunction with them. We're trying to first eliminate the legislative hurdles to cooperating with the court, not even joining it, but just cooperating with it. So we're working on that first. And then, and Putin gave us a wonderful opportunity to take the next step of actually have us sign on to it. Because, Lindsey Graham, I mean, it was a month or 2 or 3 ago. I mean, no, it was more than that. I mean, when the ICC started investigating Putin, opened the investigation on Putin, and the woman minister who's doing the kidnapping of the kids and farming them out to Russian families. So they were both, ICC opened investigations on both of them. And all of a sudden, wow, I mean, we had our first bipartisan powwow where Lindsey Graham came out and said, we're all for the court, So we really kind of see this as a window of opportunity to go back and revisit the issue and try to get the US to sign on. So that'll be kind of the second step. But did I answer your question? Yeah,
question.
yeah.
I'm just gonna throw out
Please.
three random disputes in the world today.
Three, I can only take two, but go ahead.
The Kurds are the largest, to my knowledge, the largest ethnic group with their own language.
Yeah.
Without their own country.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people in Barcelona that think there should be an independent
Right.
Catalan state.
Yeah.
Back in the 19th century, there was a war with Chile and Bolivia and Peru and Chile got together and eliminated the coastline of Bolivia that they still want to reclaim.
Yeah.
This
How do we deal with that?
How do we deal with
Okay,
this?
good. Yeah, no, great questions. So let me give you a two-part answer. The first part would be, what if there was a world federation? How would that deal with it? And then what does the movement recommend for those kinds of things now, even though we don't yet have one? So most likely, again, this is my personal speculation rather than a statement from the movement, but it would be handled through the legal system. If the Catalonians or these, this group or that group feel, the Kurds feel that they, they want their own nation, they could sue. They can go through the legal system, or perhaps their representatives, could bring it up to the World Parliament, but it gets handled through some nonviolent legal means. And that will be, enumerated by the Constitution at that time. So that's about all that I could say about that with any authority right now. But as far as what about now, there was one interesting proposal that I heard a few years ago coming out of the World Federalist Movement in regard to handling the Palestine-Israel situation. And you might know, the UN has 6 organs, and one of them is called the Trusteeship Council. And that was created to take 11 different colonies right after World War II and bring them through to independence. And the last one was Palau. And I forgot the year that Palau gained its independence, but it was done. And then the Trusteeship Council is still there on paper, but kind of got decommissioned. They're not doing anything. I mean, they make a report every year. A few people in the World Federalist Movement felt that it would be a good idea to revive that. And there've been other proposals for these kinds of situations to revive the Trusteeship Council and have that be the body that investigates and takes, brings it to resolution, whatever the resolution may be. So that out of all the proposals that I've heard, out of this movement, that's the one that spoke the most to me. Again, this is my opinion, not, a spokesperson for the movement, but and that would also kind of strengthen the UN and show the UN's role to helping these things out. So, so that's my response. Thank you. Moving on. Yes, ma'am. Please.
I thank you for my accent and Iowa council.
Okay.
The council, you will understand what I'm saying. I can prove my name but anyway, I came to Uganda and to this country from Uganda in 1982. So I've lived here more than I lived where I was born. And I truly believe, the American ideals, I put in so much. This country. I appreciate so much. I also would like to thank the Johnstons because Dr. Billings and Dr. Johnston made me a long time ago before I even moved to Wichita. But Dr. Billings and I shared so much, and when I heard about the Global Learning Center, I was attracted to it. So that's why I came to this country, to bring what I know here and the world. And Dr. Johnston actually appointed me to be an interim Global Learning Center president. So I'm always grateful because he didn't know me, but trusted me enough. And so I keep on coming back. I will never leave this. It's home for me. Now, after that speech, let me ask you some questions, sir. First of all, thank you for coming. There is the problem of mistrust. The colonized countries look at the countries that colonized them, and those they associate with suspicion. It's like, are they coming again now? I mean, even as we speak now, they are talking about those issues. So how do we convince them that this is good? Not everyone, but that's a major issue right there. And I will also say that we need to develop a global cultural understanding, and in fact, that's what I do. In my classroom, I've been teaching diversity here for many years. Now I'm in the retirement phase. But I've met students not seeing eye to eye, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether, I mean, and then at the end, some will sit at the table and say, I love this. And, I win them over and I say, I wish maybe my colleagues and people my age and over could listen to how we could change systems. And usually I teach through old-fashioned ways that I learned in the village. My grandmother, who lost her entire family in battle. And then I saw her so successful. She raised me. I teach through proverbs. In fact, I'm working on proverbs now for peace. And the students love them. Whether in my own native language, which I translated it, but do you have more proverbs? And I'm saying, oh dear, how about my colleagues? Those my age mates would they be excited about this kind of teaching and learning? I teach through stories. This chicken going here and that boat, and the young people see the logic and they understand, So in short, we need to transform education institutions and people in general. Then we can sit at the table and learn, the way I learned Shakespeare and, English and so on, okay, which is helping me now, being a global citizen. Others need to learn other ways, as she was saying, whether we're to bring religions together. Let's sit and learn about different ways of seeing life, breaking bread together. My food is the best in the classroom. Once they eat my food, they say no more hot dogs or this is so. That is my question. How do you call the second one? How do you convince the people that this is genuine? And it is. We need that. Looking at our world now. I beg your pardon? Oh, yes, something like that. Yeah. So how do we convince the people in other parts of the world that yes, they matter and they have knowledge and they are very smart. They eat, they do things that the first world does. So when you're a member of the third and fourth world, it's India.
Good. Well,
you know what it is.
Let me respond.
And we yeah. Even that you have a lot of knowledge. My grandmother had a lot of knowledge, but in many societies, even those who are here in Wichita, my grandmother, keep quiet, don't say a word, but work. Bring in money and all that.
Right.
So we need to sit at the table
Right.
and convince each other that we are one family, one global
Yeah.
family.
Well, oh, thank you. Well, actually, I'm glad that you put it that way, because actually this is taking the oneness of humanity and actually translating it into a political structure. It's making real that what all the great religions say. But oh, you're not leaving though. Okay. I said I thought it was a hit and run. You asked the questions and you're out the door. So okay. All right. Okay. Let me first ask you, in Uganda, do they speak Swahili?
Yeah.
Naelewa kidogo Swahili. Okay, yeah, naelewa kidogo Swahili. So I went to climb Kilimanjaro years ago, and I took a few months learning Swahili before I went. So the first question was about the colonized not trusting the colonizers. If you want, if you give me your email address, I will send you writings from folks from the colonized, the global South and other areas, who are actually some of the stronger advocates for this because they don't trust the Western nations directly and want something that the world, is all involved with, rather than going with the old colonizers. So they can make the argument much better than I can, but actually there's a very strong support for this. Yeah.
There's a boy founded stuff continuing here.
Mhm.
And so what we need is a voice, and we have ideas, we have been very well received here, so you are.
Yeah. Right. Well, let me complete your answer because there's still a few more hands. So the other part, though, was about education. And that's why over the history of my organization, we were really working more as lobbying Congress and doing things like that. But in the last couple of years, we realized none of this is going to happen unless the public is demanding it. So we've really we're still doing a lot of that, but we've really during my administration, we've kind of shifted our focus to doing public education and different programs so that, when they say when the people demand it, the leaders will follow, kind of. So we all agree that is a necessary part of that. And certainly there are all kinds of experiments. I mean, I did a course as a student, not as a teacher, at the UN Peace University in Costa Rica on global education, and looking at how you, work cross-culturally and all that. So the tools are there. We have to have the political will to implement them in the right places. So thank you. Give me your email later. I'll send you something. I was going this way, ma'am.
Nations, like at a government level, are most kind of gung-ho ready to go with this? Are there any? Or
Well,
other
great question. There are actually, I don't remember the number, but there is something like 20 nations. I remember India is one of them, that in their constitution, it's Article 51 in the India Constitution, says that if a World Federation is formed, we shall join. It's right in there. Gandhi, Nehru, I mean, all the folks back then had these ideas. As far as I know, not. I don't know what Modi is up to, but as far as I know, not. But yeah, there are a number. I mean, there are a number of nations that it's literally in their constitution, just as there are a number of religions that it's in their scriptures. The Baha'is are the most there. It's right in there about a world federation. In Catholicism, I had one of the popes listed up there. He wrote an encyclical on World Federation. A number of the great religions have come out directly for this. But again, this is, as I started off by saying, a bit of vanished history. But it's there. You just have to unearth it. So thank you. Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, the nations remain their own nations. The nations don't go away. But I mean, the first three levels, the local level, the state level or province, depending what country you're in, and the national levels don't disappear. What we're just talking about is adding a fourth layer, essentially. So none of that goes away. If in the process, let's say one nation wants to break into two or a region of it, whatever, whatever the legal means that are set up at the time for that, might be referendums, things of that sort, that could happen. I mean, it will go back to the people. The idea essentially is that sovereignty, rather than now existing in the nation, sovereignty goes back to the individual. And we assign a little bit to our cities, a little bit to our state, a little bit to the nation, a little bit to the world level. So essentially, it all centers around we the people and how we kind of apportion the sovereignty. but I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So did I? Yeah. Oh, okay, got it. So there are two different proposals there. One, and this is really what our Civil War was fought over. One proposal is that if a couple of years go by and a group goes, you know, we're really not benefiting from this. In fact, we're losing out. Some proposals say they can leave and have kind of exit strategies. And some other proposals say, like the US government is set up, is you can't leave. I mean, the South wanted to leave. That's why the North fought them. And, you know, to preserve the Union. So I don't know how the world constitution will be written, but it depends how it's designed, and you know, that would be the answer to your question. Well, it might, but again, I mean, we're dealing in the world of speculation now, but depending where it is down the road, there might not be weapons for a war. I mean, it depends how you play the scenario out. But yeah, I mean, there are very few choices in life, not only in global governance, but in life, that are either totally good or totally bad. Usually there's kind of an upside and a downside. So so it might be built in that if the world constitution says you can't leave, then the downside is there's the possibility of war if a group wants to leave. So, but there's also the possibility of having a new law that gives a peaceful exit strategy. Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, there are a lot of I mean, the European Union is a really good case study for a lot of these things. And yeah, so I guess that's about as much as I could say about that. But good question. Don't stop asking. Okay, going back this way. Yes, sir.
I think, you know, I don't think anything's going to happen in the world as long as the rich, the poor, the powerful, and helpless. And even the United Nations have the power of veto, whatever.
Right.
They
Right.
get it off. You cannot do anything.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because you're letting me make a point that I wanted to make. That I had those four paths before. That, as you know, it took World War I to create the League of Nations. It took World War II to create the United Nations. And a number of people have the same reaction that a number of you've had, that this is all fine and good, but it's probably going to take like World War III. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not in the political cards right now, or if not World War III, a great global environmental catastrophe or whatever. So the World Federalist Movement was hoping to head that off at the pass, you know, to have something reorganized before that happens. Although, as you know, human beings are not that good with prevention. You know, we're better with crises after the fact. So initially, the feeling was, you know, in the first 5 years after World War II, that it's going to happen now. I mean, it was imminent. So when that wasn't the case, those proposals for how to get there came up. But I have to be honest with you, in the last year or two, in the kind of international conference calls that I've been on, the tone and the mood has changed. And more people are feeling it's actually going to take a major cataclysm before people, because people are now saying that the current system, I mean, it's not being secret anymore. People aren't smiling and saying, oh, it's all fine. You know, people are now coming out and saying that this isn't working. We need something else. So at least that is up there and out and acknowledged. But a number of people have now turned a little bit less optimistic that it's actually going to take something like, you know, another pandemic that kills off a quarter of the human race or whatever. So I'm hoping that's not the case. Those of us involved are working as diligently as we can to make sure that doesn't happen. But that's, you know, that's growing as a possibility. So, yeah. And yes, sir.
Well, I want to help the United States.
Yes.
Seems the United States would be the least like of any country to join such an organization. You know, we didn't join the League of Nations, we haven't joined the International Criminal Court. There's a whole variety of other organizations we haven't joined. Something that, you know, again, disarm the United States. I think there's more guns in the United States than there are people.
Yes, yeah.
How can we do?
Yeah, well, actually, among my colleagues, we kind of put, I mean, there are definitely differences, but in this kind of conversation, we kind of put the US, Russia, and China together as the worldwide troublemakers in that respect. So, so yeah, no, it's a problem. I mean, I can't deny it. It's a problem. Again, there are opportunities like Putin doing his thing, and all of a sudden everyone loves the ICC and all that kind of stuff. So we will continue to work those where possible. But it may be that as structures fall apart more and there's mass migration from the north and the south, I mean, you know, when stuff starts going sideways, if you want to, if you're generally an optimist and if you want to see if you can really get depressed, there's a book called Heading into the Abyss by Watson. Has anyone read that? Okay, I see one or two heads. This is a fellow who's a columnist in some newspaper in the Northeast. He says he's a self-proclaimed optimist. And he said that, you know, there are many, many books about, you know, handling global warming and pandemics and stuff like that. But he said there's no book specifically on whether we have the political will to implement these things. So what this fellow does, Watson, is he goes through like a dozen big global problems, including AI and you know, the things we mentioned. And he gives an analysis of each and shows how bad it is. And then he looks at each one and does an analysis of, do we have the will to solve it, even though we know how? And concludes with each and every one giving very specific politics stuff that we don't. And as a result, the title of the book, We're Heading into the Abyss. That's his conclusion. So, so there are some of us who are trying to avoid the abyss and have the pain be minimal. So I guess that's about all I can say. Yeah. You thought you were going to like walk out in an optimistic, you know, kind of upbeat banner. Yes. Oh, yeah. So the organization that Gary Davis started, called, oh God, I'm blank on it at the moment, but the World Service Authority. They are based, they're right next door to us. We're actually looking at maybe merging more with them. And they have they have world passports, birth certificates, marriage certificates in countries where, you know, gay people can't get married. They issue certificates, etc. And the longer movie shows, you know, where they're accepted. I mean, they've been accepted in many countries actually until 9/11. And then now when I travel, I have my US passport and I have my world passport. And for a couple of years, what I would do is I'd hand I was kind of chicken. So I hand them the US first, get stamped and all that. And I would say, oh, by the way, would you stamp this? And, you know, they look at it, turn upside down, whatever. And then go, no. Okay, thank you. And I'm off. But now the last couple of times I travel internationally, it's all computerized. It's all, you know, you put your thing in. So what you know, in addition to nations, a few other entities are allowed to issue passports. The UN can issue passports. There are a few others. So what you need now is a certain chip that's put in to make it kosher, technical term. So the organization, the World Service Authority that Gary Davis started, is now, it's a very expensive process to go through and get certified and get the chip. So they're now looking to do that. So that they can all be chipped and then it becomes an official passport. Yeah. So that's still in the works. That didn't disappear. Yeah. Yes. Well, other than blow it up, no, only kidding. Well, the World Federalist Movement has put a number of proposals forward to try to modify it. I think one or two, if I remember correctly, is if a nation is involved in a particular skirmish or problem, that they basically have to recuse themselves from the vote, from a veto. Liechtenstein, of all places, you may know about this, recently came up with, I mean, it's not a solution, but it's an interesting innovation. They put forward, and I think it got passed, that if one of the Security Council nations wants to do a veto, they have to go before the General Assembly and explain why, and basically explain themselves. That's not going to stop anyone, but it's just kind of an additional step. But you know, the 5 victors of World War II don't want to. What was it? Frederick Douglass said that, you know, entities never give up power without a struggle, but you know, that will probably become more and more untenable over time. But we're working on that one as well. We're not the only ones. I love all these questions I can't answer. This is terrific. Any other questions I can't answer? Yes, sir.
Some of us have been involved in this for a long time.
Yes.
Peace and sustainability conferences held San Jose, Costa Rica, 1989.
Yes.
Participate in that. We had 70 countries represented with the government, prime ministers, religious leaders, all along. Peace and sustainability. Food security. How do we have refugees moving because of climate change? I'm coming into your country now. How do I get a job? Where do I live? You have ownership of this land. I want to camp out on it. Then going in '92, we had the URSA.
Yes.
Rio de Janeiro.
Yes.
Down there, we worked for several weeks on food security treaty, for example, and water rights. Bob, I'm very concerned because we spend a lot of energy into those. We have 3 things going on in our psyche: selfishness, greed, and ego. How do we overcome that in the process? Because at the individual level, within families, within communities, within states, all these are interacting. But now you're talking about it on a global level.
Yeah.
So far, I don't see how we get there from here.
Yeah. Wish I had the answer, but I do have a response. Actually, I have a couple of responses. So, how would I put this? So, first of all, now let me keep going back to another. First of all, I don't want to say this. It often looks like that there are clearly problems at the individual level, which is what you're pointing to. And an example I remember hearing some time ago, that it looked like the Japanese, just to give an example, were, you know, imperialistic, warmongering, et cetera, until their constitution changed. Okay? And all of a sudden, they were a peaceful nation. Now, there were no massive interventions other than the bombs at Hiroshima, whatever, but there was no need to retrain the psyche per se, that there was a change in law and in their constitution. And all of a sudden, the country was peaceful rather than attacking. Right? So there are, on the systems level, there is the notion that if you, and in fact, it works the other way too, that when we, when I worked in the prison system in California, we took, corrections officers and staff and whatever, and sent them out to these wonderful retreats where they, got enlightened and had all kinds of ideas, throw them back into that system. And all of a sudden, their best intentions got pulled out of shape and they're back in the system as it was. So it seems that changing, I mean, you could work on individual change at that level, and I think it's important to do that. But it's also possible to do systems change, and then the behavior ripples from that. And I think I'll leave it at that level as a general principle, that change could happen from the bottom up, but it could also happen from the top down. Okay, we can talk more on that. Yeah.
How do you overcome ego?
Well, I mean, there's lots of techniques. I mean, I'm born Jewish, but I'm a practicing Buddhist. I mean, I've been done 35 10-day meditation retreats, and I'm still working on my ego. So the 10-day silent retreats. So I don't know that we ever overcome that. I mean, there are some masters that do, but I think we're more likely to have change if we work at a higher level, because the individual change is really difficult. Speaking from personal experience. Yes. Well, let me make sure everyone get their first question, and then I'll take. Yeah. Let me, before I call on you again, let me make sure everyone's got a chance to ask a question who wants to. Then I'll call on people again. So, is there anyone who has not yet, who has a question who has not yet asked? Going once, going twice. Soul, go ahead.
Related to your experience, usually they say prison is a mirrors to society.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I've heard that phrase. Okay. Anything else, or are we done? Actually, they're going to kick us out in 5 minutes. Did I? Please.
It's not exactly to the topic, but it's from the last conversation.
Okay.
About the changing.
Yeah.
What do we do when what the system that's supposed to, that I believe in, democracy from below, is leading to laws that are going in the wrong direction? Yeah. Well, okay, now this is really kind of off the record. I mean, it's not the World Federalist opinion. This is my personal opinion. But honestly, at this point, I am looking toward a number of nations that I think are more sane than us at this moment in time to kind of save us. That I think if we integrate more with some other nations that are actually handling these things a lot better, that we will benefit from it. So that's part of my hope. I mean, I'm going to be spending 4 months in Europe, staying with a number of friends there. And I find a lot of what I hear that they're involved with a lot saner than what's going on over here. So this, you won't find what I just said in any book or article about this, but I am hopeful that, for example, I mean, the lobbying thing, here it's a profession, there it's a crime, So, so I'm really looking forward to some help from some people who are handling this in a much saner way. That's my very off the record, but unfortunately on tape. So they got me. So do we have to? We got about 5 minutes. Okay. So anyone else got anything? Going, yes. We'll give you the last word. Okay.
Say about the Constitution. We had the abortion in Kansas.
Yes.
And there were all
Mm.
once the vote took place, it just kind of settled down. By legislature. All that, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be the big when it comes to the Constitution.
Got it.
I really am impressed by what you said there.
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate what you're saying, but you may have to deal with a few people who are sitting next to you. Okay. Oh, okay. I'll leave you the last word. Yes. Can you say the idea, even if you don't remember the name? Well, if you're going to have a war, yes, you need the weapons, yeah. Yeah. Well, again, depending on the proposal, The issue was if we start another war, we'll have to start producing weapons again if we ban them all. But again, depending on which proposal you follow, and I like the one that says that all of the weapons weapons of mass destruction, not going out to go rabbit hunting, but all of those, that would be an illegal activity, producing bombs and tanks and that kind of stuff. So that would be a little hard to do. Well, it certainly would be easier to dispose them than have a war with them. So that's the hope. But sure. I mean, getting rid, we have, what did they say, enough nuclear weapons now to destroy the world 7 times or something like that. So yeah, it would take some work to do that, but it's not impossible to be done. So I'm going to end on that, letting you have the last word, and thank you all for coming and listening and all of that stuff. In the words of who is the singer, Afro-American piano player, blind? No, the other one. Ray Charles. Yes. So according to one of his songs, "Heaven help us all." So anyway, blessings to all of you, and keep up the good work. Thank you. Oh, and let me tell you what's over here, okay? Because some of the stuff you can take, some of it you can't. So these are on the table are past journals from my organization. You're welcome to grab one of those if you want. The books and the photo on top there, those are mine. Please leave them there, but you're welcome to look at them. Okay. And that's what's here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'll email you at this one.
Yes, email me there and I'll send you the information on some of the people, again, from the Global South and the formerly colonized that were involved. Great. Well, blessings to you. Do you live close by?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
thank you, everybody,
Meeting you.
for coming. I just want to remind you, we're going to have next meeting November the 19th. And it's going to be, we'll let you know what's going to be the subject, but it's something around religious tolerance or something like that.